Hi guys, welcome to the first episode of Let's Talk About It. I've got an amazing guest today, my first one, and I'm just going to let him introduce himself.
So it's Ricky, and the main reason for coming on the show to speak to you, Chelsea, is to kind of talk to you about my grief journey from the age of 4 onwards to now, and just to kind of spread my experiences to people that may be going through the same thing but don't have any sort of platforms to listen to or people to relate to, if that makes sense, to just kind of give them some comfort and to kind of spread awareness, really.
So let's start then. So how was it when you lost your mum? Because it was your mum that you lost, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
How old were you?
I was 4.
So because a lot of people would probably say, oh, you were really young, so it probably didn't really impact you. But I feel like you've had a total different experience.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain a little bit of your experience with kind of losing your mum and how it's affected you from then to kind of now?
I guess it's crazy because I actually remember the day, which is mad enough. Because we was at home, it was me and my sister, and we was being looked after this Irish lady called Lucy, I think. And I knew Dad kept going to the hospital. I remember he had to keep going to the hospital and stuff, and I was curious, where's Mum, sort of thing, because we had actually visited her in the hospital, and I remember she looked really brown and yellow because I guess she was the medication or whatever they had her on in the hospital and stuff. So he came home one day and he walked through the door, and it was kind of like I was playing with a truck. It's mad. I actually remember it so long ago, but it was such a focal point. So when he came in through the door, I remember him taking me and my sister upstairs, and he sat us on his lap in his room, and he told us that Mum ain't going to come back. So I was kind of like, he said to me, I remember him saying to me, she's gone up into the sky. I was like, okay, she's flying, sort of thing, but I didn't really know the context and how that moment then was going to impact my life forever. I didn't know. So, yeah, and I remember my sister being sat there. She was a little bit older than me. Now, I don't really know if she really understood as well, because she would have been coming on 6, maybe 7. So all I remember is that he said that she's gone in the sky, and then after that I must have just gone and carried on with my own business.
Playing. Yeah.
Because I didn't know.
What age do you think it then hit you? Oh my God, I haven't actually kind of got a mum physically here.
I think it was about 7 or 8 when you start getting into primary school. You start coming into your own age, getting interested in things such as football and stuff, and making friends. You start looking around. You're like, oh, my dad's bringing me to school, but everybody's bringing their mums, and I'm looking around, starting to feel a bit like. That's when I started to feel left out. You start feeling a bit singled out, and then it came to. Obviously primary school, all the mum jokes and all that stuff start around, and people start hearing or knowing. I had a close group of friends that I went to the primary school I went to who knew my family and knew Mum had gone. So obviously some of the kids knew, and then obviously, kids talk, I talk, and there would be some days where I might be crying at school and a teacher might have to have a chat to me about it. Which those are very blurred memories, but I do remember getting upset at primary school.
I think kids are the worst for trying to take your. They might think, oh, I feel sorry for him, but they'll use your story as a.
Yeah.
Because that's just kids, isn't it?
It
so
is.
I can imagine for you, it was probably quite difficult at that time, even to concentrate on schoolwork. Was that affected?
I wouldn't
or was
say
you quite
so.
good at school?
I was quite good at school because
That's
my
good.
dad, he's so regimented with me. So I was so scared of him, I knew I had to do good at school. Yeah. So he was he's been, I can't thank him enough for what he's done, to become a mum and a dad, just like that, And I remember I did have a conversation with him once, and Mum had actually got ill first, and she kind of had her chemo, and she kind of recovered, but then it came back again, and he knew that she was going to go this time. He knew because she was sicker this time. And that's the brief sort of feedback he's given about it, but he doesn't really expand on it and that
talk too much about it.
no, he's like I said, like outside, like he's quite a closed book. When it comes to me and make sure I get jobs done in the flat or everything's savings, and he's on me like 24/7. But I love him for that because he keeps me in line. But when it comes to the whole mum situation, I feel there's a lot more to obviously losing his best friend. I feel that there's a lot more that may have happened that I don't know, which makes me think, oh, why is it we're not in contact with her mum and dad or her side of the family? Like, I don't know if they're dead or alive.
Do you know their names or anything?
So I knew she had a sister called Bunty that emigrated to South Africa. That's it.
That's all you know.
That's all I know. Like,
Crazy.
I don't know her mum, dad's name. Don't even know what they look like. I've never seen a picture. All I know is that they came from Stranraer.
And I think when you're getting older, the main thing that I think with mental health, this is a lot of people struggle with, because when you don't kind of know where you've come from or where you've nested from, you then start thinking kind of, do I pick that trait up from them? Do I pick it? You end up overthinking
Done
it because
all the time.
I mean, I haven't lost a parent, and I
Yeah.
can't imagine what that feels like. But I mean, my real dad, I've not ever had any kind of relationship with him, and the same with his family. And I have them thoughts as well, kind of similar to like, who are they? I could walk past them on the street and not even realise that you're related to them, and it is a bit of a scary thought. So how do you kind of manage all that day to day, like being a man now? Like, how do you feel like being a man, do you feel like with your dad, do you feel like because you see him as a real man figure now, do you think it's because he can't go in his emotional state? Because, you know, we talk about a lot on the show that men try and cave themselves in. Do you feel like that's kind of what your dad's done? And do you feel like that has affected you as a child to now an adult and being a man yourself? Or do you feel like you're more in touch with your emotions?
More in touch easily. And I would definitely say, from what I know my mum was like, I get it from her. That's where I feel like that's where my trait of mum comes in me. Whereas dad, you know, like I've had to kind of like manage him. It's weird because he's had to kind of bring me up without a mum, but then the older I've got, I've had to try and manage him emotionally when it comes to talking about mum. So it becomes, it is frustrating. It is frustrating because it's like, it's no closure. Like, I don't feel like I got closure on, you know, like the amount of treatment she had and who she really was as a person, because he doesn't really go into too much detail. And I'm not downplaying him. That's just the way he wants to live, you know. There are other people that, she had a friend called Marion that passed away a couple of years ago. That was her best friend. And, you know, she would have been, I wish I confided in her. I wish I did to this day. And I regret that, because that was my mum's best friend. So she would have known her. Do you know what I mean?
She would have known more about her to be able to maybe pick up the pieces your dad wasn't.
Exactly.
So
So
it must be so hard for your dad, though, because it's, you know, the
100%.
love of your life. And if they have gone through a lot together, it must be heartbreaking for him as well as for you and your sister.
Absolutely.
But how do you feel like it's affected you now you're older? Like what kind of emotions do you have now that you still feel like you have to deal with, like even relationships, friendships, groups around you? Like, what do you kind of help yourself with?
I think, so basically, I've been searching for questions. I had those questions in my head my whole entire life, but I just didn't know how to kind of use it into one word. And I had a chat with this woman who I was doing like bereavement support with, and it's through Cruise Support. And she said it's abandonment. And when she said that, it literally nail on the top. Like, I literally hit the nail on the top. And it was like, even though my mum had no choice to leave because of her illness, and that's life, right?
Yeah.
I still felt that sense of abandonment. So what I think that's done to me growing up is, if I get close to anyone or let someone really in, they're just going to leave. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I can.
And that's what I'm
Do you
used
feel like
to.
that's more with females, or do you feel like it's with everyone?
I
Because
think it's
obviously your
more
mum
with
being a
females.
female.
I think it's more with females. I think in regards with friends, like, I've got quite a large network of friends, but there's only so many that I actually hang around with. So I've got quite a lot of acquaintances that if I see on a night out, I'd chat to them like we're best friends, because that's just the way I am, you know.
Yeah, you're a polite guy, aren't you? Right?
Yeah. And whereas I've got like my friends that I talk to day to day, meet up, we go out every weekend, but those are I don't rarely talk to them about my mum. There's only one friend that I must say I do, who I'm really close with. It doesn't actually live that far from me, but and his mum and dad, they've been great. Like, they're fully aware of my situation. They treat me like one of their own, you know. And that's one
really
thing
nice.
that I would say, if there was one person I would go to out of my male sort of friends, it would be him and his family.
Oh, bless. That's really cute.
Hmm.
It's good that you've got that support, folks. I feel like a lot of males out there don't actually
No.
have that one friend that they feel like kind of they can go to and get all their emotions out without being
Yeah.
judged or laughed at or joked at or spoke about. But if you could speak to yourself back then when you lost your mum as a part of someone as a guidance, what would you say to yourself? Just in case there's a kid out there that's just gone through it themselves, like maybe they could watch this. You never know who's going to watch this and might just think, oh, that really helped me. What kind of advice or guidance or kind of anything you could kind of maybe give someone out there?
I would definitely say, look, take the strength off your current parent you've got now, because they're going to be the ones that set a platform for you. Because when I was young, I didn't have no sense of direction. So my dad was that sort of guy that directed me down the right path, because after grief, you can go down one or the other, you know. So he kept me straight and narrow. So I'd definitely say take every sort of like guidance and support from your parent that's here. And then after that, I guess it's just a case of just accepting how you feel. Do you know what I mean? Like, you might not know how you feel at the time. And if you do want to talk to someone about it, don't be afraid to, you know, because the more you hold it in, it's just going to be like a glass filling up. It's going to overfill eventually. And that could make you snap in sort of like so many different ways, physically and emotionally. So I would definitely keep on the straight and narrow, have a good circle of friends around you, a good set of network. And then if you want to, investigate further into how you feel, try and find those ways. This is why, again, another reason why I'm on here, because I'm trying to find another way of me talking about this. Then that might get more people to come forward, and then I can be like, oh my God, like, they might say something they've gone through and I've gone through the same, and then I feel a bit more at ease, even though it's such a tough situation to be in. And, like, it's a struggle, like, every day. I've managed to try and live with it, but I'll never accept losing her. Never.
I don't think anyone can. No. I don't think you can overcome grief ever, no matter what age you are. Because to be fair, I was talking to someone the other day about, because we were saying, speaking about your story, to be fair, because they were asking who have I got on, and I was saying to them, it's crazy because a lot of people would look at him and think he was only 4, so what does he know really? Exactly. But then it's kind of like, would you look at a child that's in foster care that has no mum and dad of choice and then think, oh, well, they don't know nothing. It's the same when you've had anyone that's left you, that's your blood, or someone that's meant to care for you, it's traumatic.
It is. It's
whether you know more about it or not. And I guess when you're 4, you don't know anything, but when you get older, you're then like, oh wow, like, what is this emotion?
This is it.
I don't know what this emotion is.
This is something like, because obviously when she passed, it was kind of like a Sunday ritual. Every other Sunday we'd go to the graveyard, me, Dad and Cara, right? And it was like, when I was younger, at first I was just like, no emotion, like, not even, I knew it was my mum down there, but I didn't cry, I didn't get sad or upset, anything. It was only when I started actually to get into my teenage years, and now, to this day, cry every time I go. Every time I go. And I said to Dad, I asked him, and this was years ago I asked him, because he has given me some sort of feedback now and then. It's very minimal. And he'd be like, oh, the reason you're grieving now is because when you was young, you didn't know how to. You didn't know what feelings were. You didn't know what emotions. You didn't know what loss was. Now you understand. So because you've kind of like adapted those feelings and those emotions, because you've matured as a man, you've grown up, you now feel pain, which results in grief and crying and showing your emotions. So that's why every time now it's just, I don't even like leaving. Like, I go there and it's like I stand there and I chat to her and stuff like that, and when I leave I feel bad.
Oh, bless you.
It's weird, like I can't really explain the feeling. I don't want to leave her on her own, but
She's never on her own anyway.
No.
I always say to people,
No.
just because you've lost someone doesn't mean they're not there with you. Like when you're carrying their blood, whatever you're seeing, they're seeing. Like they're walking within you. That's
100%.
You've come from our ancestors anyway. Not saying that's a
100%.
way of.
Yeah.
But I think, there's a lot of people that grieve and they stay at home and they either go one way or the other. They turn to things that aren't good for them, or they kind of look and think, do you know what, that has happened to me, but I'm gonna make a good life of myself as such, and hope that they're looking down at me and being proud.
Exactly.
And I think if you're kind of doing that, you're kind of doing it for them. You're living on their name. You're living on their legacy. So I think what you're doing, Ricky, today is, I'm loving the fact you're my first ever guest here, because we've gone quite a long way back. I've known you from, I think I was 18 when I first met you.
Years ago. And
even then, I remember you talking about your mum then, but it was even from now to then, you never opened up at all.
No.
Now you're very like, this is what's happened to me. I feel like you're starting to accept that it's happened, but you're still not happy, because at the end of the day, are you ever going to be with that?
No.
But
it's just like, there's certain days I wake up and I'm just thinking like, why? Do you know what I mean? Like, maybe like back then they didn't have the technology to treat much leukemia cancer patients. Now they probably would have been able to save her. And I always ask those questions in my head, but why am I doing it? Am I just making that worse for myself? Do you know what I mean? I'm constantly searching for like an answer. And, when I go to see her, the answer's there. Do you know what I mean? But there's still so much before that I don't know and want to understand, and it's hard to understand. So yeah, every day is a different day, like some days I could feel.
So how do you deal with your bad days?
I just try and get through each minute of the day,
Do you know when it's like, have you sought support elsewhere?
Mm-hmm.
And how did you find that? Because a lot of, you probably know with all your friends, they're all football kind of lads, aren't they? So if say one of them was going to therapy, you've already experienced that. So kind of how would you explain therapy to them that made them feel a bit more comfortable about going?
I think, so what I've had recently is Cruise Support, So basically you're just talking to someone and they ask you questions based on your answers that you're given. So they're actually just making you think more than them speaking, which is actually a really clever way.
That's very cool.
And the way I kind of found that, I think it was like November, and I had a bit of a rut. I was just kind of like, it's coming towards Christmas, which is a focal point. I'm like, not looking forward to it because it's, family time. And I'm like, I feel like I just need to talk to someone that can kind of understand, So I signed up for Cruise Support. I had to wait 16 weeks though. 16 weeks. And do you know what the joke is, I had to literally search for it. There's no I don't see any advertising anywhere. Like,
so is that all based for grief, or is that just a network? It's
grief, bereavement support. Yeah, they solely focus on grief and people that have lost. They got.
And what's that charity called again?
Cruise Support.
Cruise Support.
And they got like a massive Instagram page, loads of followers and stuff like that. So I've had like 5 sessions with her, and every session I've felt so much better. It's knackering because when you're talking about your emotions, it's like it's mentally draining because you're just going to different places in your mind and your memory bank, and you're resurfacing it, so it's proper emotional. But when she talks to me, she kind of makes me see a bit more sense. So she kind of like directs me as well. So
navigates you to the answer as such.
This is it. So this is where I kind of see my life has gone. It's like my dad has kind of directed me around the right path. Now I'm trying to find ways outside him, excuse me, to direct me and navigate me to other areas that he possibly can't do at the moment.
Yeah.
So I would definitely recommend it. I wouldn't rush into doing it. Like,
I think you got to be ready.
You got to be ready. Like, this is, I'm 35 now. Do you know what I mean? So 31 years ago, I lost mum. So I wouldn't recommend it to someone that maybe has just recently lost someone, but in the same time, give yourself time to be ready, because it's quite...
The healing process, I think, a lot of people kind of look at people with mental health or people that are struggling as a, why aren't you getting up and going? But I don't think people realise how actually hard it is to actually realise that you've, one, admit that your own problem is such in a way, because it's only you standing in your own way. So I think it's very hard for people to kind of go down the healing path because they don't realise how hard it is. Because I've had to have therapy. Well, I've had 2 loads of counselling. I've had 2 loads of therapy, talking therapy. And I feel like I've only just started finding myself now.
Yeah.
And I don't think, when I look back, I'm like, I don't think I was genuinely ready to accept the hard work that comes involved with it. But I think when you start finding yourself, the world just does look a bit different.
It does. It does. I think also, I do remember when I was young, his dad got this guy in to just sit there and talk to us. I think it was like maybe 2 years after Mama passed. I'm not really sure. But he used to come in on like a evening, maybe between 7 and 8. And he used to just chat to us about Mum. But I don't really remember it to detail because, again, I would have been probably 7 at the time.
Yeah.
So I don't really remember that far back. But I do remember Dad got someone in to talk to us about Mum and stuff like that. But I don't believe it went on for that long. I think it was just Dad's way of getting someone to kind of talk to us because he couldn't physically articulate how to talk to us in that way, which is fine, you know. Like, I don't know how far Dad's grief goes back, you know, before losing Mum. Obviously we lost my brother as well that I didn't actually meet. So he was actually born before. So he was born before my sister, but he died like...
His dad's had 2 loads.
So he's had 2 loads and then had to deal with bringing up 2 kids as well in a house that he's had to start affording for himself.
And even doing it all by himself as well, because obviously if your mum's family wasn't involved.
No one. I don't know what sort of...
What kind of family does your dad have? Like, are you close with them?
So they're here. So most of them are kind of like in London. I've got an uncle that used to live in Oxford but moved to Reading. But from what I remember back then, most of them were kind of like all in London at the time. I don't know what sort of support he got from them. I'm sure they would have been there for him and helped him. And that's something that I've not really tried to explore because I don't want to feel like I'm touching a nerve. So for him to be able to do it single-handedly, like putting us into childcare, that would have cost him a lot. All the holidays we was in childcare apart from 2 weeks where we'd go away to Butlins or something like that together.
At least he'd done his absolute best with you, because there's a lot of people out there that have lost, and you know the mum or the dad go down. At least maybe that was his way of just keeping up float.
Yeah,
keep on going.
I can't fault what he's done with me and my sister. I can't.
Well, I've met your sister, and I've met you obviously 'cause you're here today. But I mean, both of you are absolutely amazing kids. Like from your dad, I think big round of applause to him, because both of you are really lovely.
Yeah, he's very regimented. He's very regimented, and I think, you know, he's Caribbean, so his bringing up methods are quite strict.
Yeah, get on with it.
Exactly,
which is most of the
absolutely
that culture is more.
Exactly.
Kind of get up and get on.
Exactly that. So the fact he's kind of made me the man I am today, like, I can't thank him enough. Hence why I do so much for him now. You know, like, my time is to give that time to him, you know, because he's getting on now. So it's got to reverse the roles, you know. As much as he likes doing his own thing and he's very independent, I'm very independent too, but I want to try and give much back to him as much as I can. And I say that to him and he's like, you don't need to, I'm your dad, sort of thing. But it's just me, like, you're
the oldest boy, you're his boy, so
exactly, I'm his boy. So I said, this is you and me, by the way, so do you know what I mean? I'm just doing what's the blood you've given me, sort of thing.
Yes.
So yeah.
What else do you feel's impacted you with mental health? Like, so obviously you've had your grief, but do you feel like anything else has kind of, you know, is it just been that you've lost your mum that you feel has impacted your mental health, or do you feel like other areas of life has kind of been hard on you?
I think lockdown. I think lockdown was was bad. The first one wasn't actually that bad, you know, because the weather was
Like
good.
everyone got a break, basically.
Well, I was still working from home, and I was living in Purley at the time. I was renting a room. Didn't really know I was going to work, blah, blah, blah. But the people who I live with made me an office upstairs, which was so
That's
nice
cute.
of them. But yeah, the first lockdown was actually, it was all right, because I guess we was all still figuring out what's going on. Do you know what I mean? Like, how long's this for? The weather was nice. For me, you know me, I'm a social person. So missing that social aspect was quite difficult, but got to know all my neighbours and was out there at the front socially distancing with them. So it wasn't so bad. It's the winter one, that was it, because it was cold, it was wet. It was kind of like, we was due to have Christmas, and then Boris came down and said, actually, do you know what? You're not having Christmas this year. I'm like,
What?
So, and then at that time, I just felt so, even though I was living with the two people that I live with, I felt so alone. I felt so difficult. It was like, and I felt like I was like in my room. I felt like I was in one of those, you know, those white vests that people get put in a corner and just could not escape. So I was just like, do you know what? I need to do something about this because I don't feel good. And then every day was different for me after then. When I kind of felt it, the raw emotion of feeling like low and just really anxious. I just don't know where it came from. It just all of a sudden, because I've never really felt that before until then. And then after that, it was kind of like, I need to do something about this because I'm just feeling worse. I wasn't eating really much. Sleep was terrible. It affected my work performance. Not that it was brought up by management, but it was the urge to go to work. Like, just go up a few flights of stairs. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Really impacted me in so many ways. So I went to my doctors and they referred me to the NHS, and I was doing this, I think it's like cognitive behavioural sort of speaking therapy.
Oh, okay.
And that was incredible.
What was that about then?
So it was kind of like she wanted to pinpoint what was actually making me low and giving me tactics and how to deal with it. So I had like maybe 5 or 6 sessions with her, and they were only half an hour. So I had to kind of send her, like, before we had the sessions, like the background and stuff like that, me, and what's affecting me at the moment and stuff like that, where my thoughts go in, sort of thing. They ask you, when you have your initial consultation, they ask you that one question they have to, are you looking to
Commit suicide.
commit suicide, which was never the case. I just feel like I lost my whole personality because I know I'm a bubbly person. I know I'm always talking. You know, I know I'm always laughing. Do you know what I mean? I'm always trying to make others happy. And I felt like at that time I forgot myself I was focusing on other people rather than myself. And then I was like, sugar, like, where am I going? Like, what's happening to me right now? And those sessions helped. And I'd done those until like July 2021, which this decision actually drove me to move away and get my own flat because I just needed more space.
You need a bit of kind of realisation of what you needed.
Exactly.
Because I think as much as lockdown was a really bad thing, I do feel like a lot of people
got benefit from it.
Yeah, but I also think a lot of people were hard on themselves of feeling bad to feel alone. And I think what everyone's got to remember is we're pack animals.
Yeah.
We're not meant to be stuck in alone.
No.
We're meant to see people. We're
No.
meant to talk. Whether that's even like, you know, even if your enjoyment is to relax at home by yourself watching TV, I do still think, you know, you've probably been at work all day around people and that's why you now need to relax.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, we need to see people.
Exactly.
So I feel like a lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves of saying I feel alone when really it's not a bad word to say.
Yeah, and the thing is like even though I lived with 2 other people, they were great. I lived there for 10 years and they're like my family. I love them to bits, and you know, they really supported me through some times as well. But for me on my journey of independence, I just felt like I needed to get out and get a bigger space and stuff like that. So I'm so glad I did it in the end because it has helped.
I don't blame you. I think a lot of people looked. Your good days now, like how do you manage? Because obviously you've gone into like your bad kind of what is your day to day now of what you kind of feel like you need to do to kind of keep yourself afloat?
I think it's just talking to people, you know, like accepting how I feel, accepting I'm going to have bad days, maybe a bad hour, and just try and like compress it, not try and like, so sometimes if I have feel a bit rubbish, I might come off my phone, or I might go really quiet if I'm in the office. And it's weird because I try not to I try to hide it, but I can't. I've just got one of those faces where I just can't hide it. People know when I'm not feeling good.
Probably you're just probably not smiling, Ricky.
Yeah, probably. I'm just like that, you know. I think I just take every day at a time.
You do go to the gym a lot now as well, don't you? Do you feel like that's an impact on you?
Massively. Thing is, I've gone to the gym for a few years now, but only over probably the last 8 months, I've really gone solid, like with one of my mates. So we go at like 5 o'clock every morning, and it sets me up for the day. Don't get me wrong, there's sometimes I need a rest. I've had a rest recently for 2 weeks, and I've gone back this week, and I feel great. Like, I think the gym is just literally a good place to kind of switch off from the outside world. And it does help. Exercise helps you mentally. It really does. And that kept me afloat, especially when I was going through my difficult, you know, feeling anxious stage and having my talking therapy stage. The gym helped massively. And I always felt like a brand new person coming out.
You look like a brand new person. I swear, I was like, Jesus Christ, where's their arms come from, Ricky? Last time I saw you, you were just
skinny.
Yeah, I think I could put my hand around your arm. Now you're all like, ooh.
trying.
And you do your football as well. Do you feel like being with the lads, football? Because obviously, I guess you've experienced, you know, you're a single man living on your own at the moment, aren't you, ladies? But kind of, you probably hang around with a lot of people that are getting married.
I do.
Got kids.
Yep.
How do you feel that impacts you? Because I can imagine like their conversations might be a little bit different to yours. Do you feel like kind of...
Part of me feels like I feel like I'm falling back, like everybody's just taking off and I'm just kind of like there. But when I deep it, I kind of think, you know what? I'm not going to get into something just to look good for it or just to feel like it's right to be in a relationship and have kids at that age. That's just the way I see it. Like, the way I see it is I'll have a partner who I meet naturally and I'll have kids with them naturally. Like, you can't put a timestamp to it, you know? Like, I just fully believe, like, my day will come, but I've got good enough foundations. I've lived on my own since I was 19, you know, flats, house shares, now a flat on my own. So, and I've got, you know, a good job. So I feel like I've done a lot for myself now versus a lot of people that have got like kids and families.
I think sometimes things don't happen at a certain age because it's not meant to as well. Exactly. I think, you know, I think your journey's meant to happen for your own self.
Absolutely.
I think maybe if you had a kid a few years ago, you might have not been mentally prepared because you had to go through everything that you've kind of gone through the past few years.
Exactly.
Because I think if you had a kid now, you'd be a better dad now than maybe what you would have been.
100%.
Not saying you're going to have a kid.
Yeah,
in
well,
9 months.
I don't have any plans to. Do you know what I mean? But I think it's definitely something I do obviously want to have children. I want to have a family, but I'm always been a believer of letting it happen naturally. I don't sit there and think, oh, my day will come. There's sometimes when I see my friends and they're bringing their partners up and I'm just, Ricky rolling on his own. You know, I'm just kind of like, oh, do you know, it does make me feel a bit rubbish, but at the same time, I'll do it when it's right. Like, my day will come.
I think independency should never be looked at as rubbish anyway.
No, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be.
Being independent on your own is so much more important than being with someone because you're... You know, when you can feel comfortable by yourself, you're never then dependent on anyone around you.
No.
But I can imagine when you do have that day of like marriage or baby, I can imagine it's going to be a really happy moment, but it's also probably going to be a quite down moment. Because
I'd want mum there.
Yeah.
You know? I have thought about that, like, if that day comes, you know, and when I've had partners in the past, like, that's how I feel it's kind of affected my relationships as well, is because I've always been able to meet their mum and dad, but they just meet it. Even though my dad's a great person and probably the best person on the world, just saying, they've not been able to develop a bond, a female bond with my side of the family, probably apart from my sister, but there's only a couple of partners that have met my sister, really. But when it comes to like a mother figure, they've not been able to meet a mum. Because
You've never been able to have your mum say
have
like if she likes her,
yeah,
basically.
and I've had to have that conversation like every time if I've been speaking to someone that in the years gone by. Oh yeah, they'd drop a question in. Oh, so where do you live with your mum and your dad? I'm like, here we go. I've got to explain it again. It actually happened at work. Something happened at work a couple of months ago, and it was this guy, lovely guy. And one morning, I'd forgot my laptop, so I had to come into the office, drive back home, and get it. Come back to the office. Then and this guy was stood out there having a smoke at the time. And then a couple of days later, he saw me coming in with my laptop. He goes, "So what did your mum think of you having to come back straight away?" I was like,
yeah, because a lot of people say stuff like that, don't they?
This is it. And at the time, I just answered it. It goes, "Oh, yeah." She was thinking, "Oh, what are you doing back here?" I just kept it really short. And the only reason I'd done that is I didn't want to make him feel awkward.
Yeah.
So what I actually did at the time, like, it was so hard to hear it. When you hear it, it's just like, you instantly go to a place thinking, sugar, like, I got to tell him, do I tell him I've not got a mum? Do I tell him, oh, don't worry, I couldn't, she's dead? Or do I just play along with it and then address it at another time, which is exactly what I did. So a couple of days later, I went over to him and I spoke to him. I said, look, the reason I gave you a bit of a bluntish, sheepish answer in the lift is because my mum isn't with us anymore. She passed away when I was young, and he felt terrible. And I tried to tell him, I said, look, you weren't to know. You weren't to know.
But
like,
still, I think people just need to be a bit mindful. If you
Be
don't know that
mindful,
person,
exactly.
be careful what you're going to say, because you just don't know what they've gone through or what they are going through.
Exactly. I was just like, why didn't you say your dad? Like, why did he instantly say mum? Do you know what I mean? It was just kind of felt like, I looked up to that, I was like, really? But there we go, yeah. He didn't mean no harm by it.
But it's just one of those, I can imagine you've dealt with a lot. So then it ends up boiling up, isn't it? It's like a kettle. When you're constantly having people say something to you, you end up at the point it just ends up over.
It's so
boiling.
so many things that happen as reminders. Like, there's so many triggers, like Mother's Day. We see all the Mother's Day posts on Instagram. That day, I think that day's worse than Christmas Day.
I can imagine.
Easily, because you see everybody posting memory pictures of their mum when they've gone to concerts with them or gone for drinks with them or in their Christmas jumpers, whereas me,
you haven't got any kind
of memories.
I've
got baby photos, but I've got no photos to show me and my mum going out and doing all of that. So then that makes me feel, I look at it and I just have to swipe off. I do post for her because, you know, I love...
She should always be remembered.
It's
regardless.
my thing, you know, like I like showing remembrance of my mum and my love for her. And if that's one of the many ways I can do it, I'll do it. But just seeing the others, it's just you're scrolling and just like, again, I'll just get so frustrated. I'm like, why couldn't I have had that, you know? And that's where days like that, I just feel like a proper stab in the ribs, you know? You would think you would get used to it, Mother's Day, but now because it's kind of like a lot of it's very social media driven now as well and promoted.
Everything's on social media.
It's everywhere. It's Mother's Day, you go into Mother's Day, buy a card. Like, I had a situation 2 days ago, I went to buy my mum a birthday card, which I do every year. Always put a card down there, regardless. And you're looking in the cards and you're just like, the words, they don't tailor to my situation. Like, there's no cards in there that signify about, you know, your mum that's passed. There's nothing. It's all, you walk into a card shop, they all insinuate your mum's alive. All.
That's very true.
And this is the thing where I feel like it's the ignorance of the promotion of grief, or there's not enough support around it. There really isn't. And
it's like everyone wants their kind of lost ones to be remembered, but it's like,
how are you
kind of get judged if you do as well, because it's kind of like if you're always going to go on about someone that isn't here, people then look at you and think, well, they're not here, get over it. But it's like you can never get over that. So that's why I like that movie. What's it called? The Disney one, Coco. I can't remember what it's called. It's a Spanish one or a Mexican one. But it's basically, it's like the people up in heaven only live in heaven if you remember them on earth. So as long as you're talking about them and living through them and speaking about them, they always will live up there. But if you forget them, they literally just disappear.
Yeah.
And I just love that because it's like
Mhm.
it's a story tailored, because maybe if you watched that when you were 4, you might have had a bit
more of an
understanding, because I don't feel like it must be so hard for, you know, like parents even of today to explain to their kids, even if their brothers passed away, their sisters or their mums or dads or even grandmas and granddads, because it is kind of like, if I sat down my kids right now, they'd probably be off colouring in within 2 seconds, because it just wouldn't register, because it would be like, what? I don't know what you're saying.
Exactly like me when I was young. It's just, it kind of depends, really. I guess, like I said, I think grief is, in a broad thing, it's the same, but everybody deals with it different, right? No matter what age you lose someone or how close they are to you. Someone actually asked me a question. I actually had this question quite a lot through my life, and they goes, what would you rather, not what would you rather, but they goes, how would you have felt if you had managed to live a life and lose her now versus when you were young? And to me, I can't really answer that question.
Yeah.
I think it would be harder now, easily, because I would have developed that relationship, that bond,
experience,
been able to tell her that I love her. Whereas at the same time, it hurts so much because I was young, because I never got to do any of that. I
never got to say goodbye either.
Never got to say goodbye. Never got to tell her I love her, how much she means to me. I never got to do any of that, you know. So sometimes I feel like I've just been cheated, and just everything, you know, because I know I'm a mother's boy. I know it. I know I'm getting on really well with my dad, but I know deep down I was my mother's boy.
Yeah, most boys are, to be honest.
Yeah, because I'm quite sensitive. I'm a bit of a sensitive soul, you know.
Yeah.
So I definitely know I've got that from her. So yeah, there's no sort of like, you can compare the two, but for me, I can't compare they're both difficult. I wouldn't want either, basically, you know.
Yeah, if you could choose none, thank you.
Yeah, I'd just rather it not had happened, but
I think your story would hit everyone, to be honest. Anyone that's lost a parent can probably relate to your story. And that's what I was saying at the beginning. It's quite mad, because for the age of a 4-year-old, you wouldn't think, but you're now a man and you've dealt with so much. But in all honesty, you should be very proud of yourself as well, because you've dealt with it in such a, like, I've never heard you be in any trouble, and you've never used, obviously, the loss of your mum as an excuse either to anything. So it's kind of like, you should be really proud of yourself for the fact that you've held that together. Yeah. But is there anything else you kind of want to speak about, or? I
think it's just like, you know, like, accept the journey you're on, sort of thing. You know, I hope people listening have kind of taken comfort from hearing my story, and they don't feel so alone. And like, if they wanted to reach out and chat to me, they can, or whatever. And just like, the pain does get easier. It does, you know, it may feel really raw for a while, but don't feel like you're an outcast. You know, you got to do them proud. You got to, you know, live your life because they would want you to do that. You know, a lot of things I've done in my life, like getting jobs and buying a car and all those little things that kind of like add ingredients to you as a person. You know, I've done it all for her.
Like that, add ingredients.
Yeah.
A little bit seasoning.
Yeah, that's it. I do it all for her, you know, and, you know, she would want me to carry on living my life while still remembering her, and she knows that, and I know that too. So, yeah, that's probably the best advice I could give to people.
You've done really amazing, Ricky.
Thank you.
But shall we leave it there?
Yeah, let's go. Yeah, all good.
All right, well, thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.